Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be reading true, scary stalker horror stories. I hope you enjoy them. So, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. One night, I, an 18-year-old male, was at the gym around 10 p.m. because I worked all day and my gym stays open all night. I was casually working out as I always have. Out of nowhere, this very short Hispanic guy comes out of nowhere and asks me what I'm doing later. Thinking this is very odd, I decided to ignore him and act like I couldn't hear him because of my headphones. He kept asking me, but eventually left. When I finished my workout, I went into the locker room to get my keys and check myself out in the mirror. As I entered the locker room, the guy was sitting on the bench staring at me, like watching my every move. So I skipped looking myself in the mirror and grabbed my keys to go out to the bathroom real quick. I can see that he starts to follow me as I head to the urinal, so I quickly resort to a stall. When I left the stall, he is still staring from the urinal. I ignore him and start leaving the gym, but he still follows me. Once again, he asks me what I'm doing tonight and what my name is, but this time I couldn't pretend to not hear him, so I just said, "Sorry man, I'm not interested," and quickly got to my car and drove away. A week later, I had work again this day, so I was at the gym around 10 p.m. and everything was normal. I was working out. I saw some friends and then I see the same guy from a week ago staring at me, whilst laying against an empty wall. I try to ignore him, but every machine or workout I do, he starts to follow me. I stayed by some friends so that he would hopefully not come near me. When those friends left, so did he, so I thought I was safe. I get my stuff together and head out around 11:30. At this point, my phone had died. I was a little worried, but then I started to freak out because when I approached my car, there was a rose in my truck's handle on the driver's side. I actually started to run and went back in to get assistance from someone working because I didn't feel like dying that day. After removing it, I sped home as fast as I could. A few days later, I had a normal workout. Didn't see him till I went to my truck. He was parked right next to me, standing in front of his car. When I got in, I could see him watching me the whole time. Now, every time I go late at night, he's waiting for me and asking me weird questions. I talked to the workers about this, and they said that he's not from here and is just trying to be nice. But I can't help but wonder, why doesn't he get the hint when I tell him no all the time? I wake up hours early in the morning to go to the gym now, but when I go late, he's still there watching me every time. What should I do? Another time there was a rose on my windshield and a phone wire wrapped around my handle. I posted a picture. Then, more recently, he added me on Snapchat. I don't know how he knows my name or how he knew what car was mine in the first place. But regardless, it's really freaky. For some context, I'm a 32-year-old female. This happened to me when I was about 25 or 26. I work full-time as a researcher at a university, which is where these encounters took place. I'm not a professor or anything, and because of my age at the time, I could have easily been mistaken for just another student wandering around campus. On some days when the weather was nice, I would prefer to spend my lunch hour strolling around the university grounds outside, or sitting underneath a shady tree on a bench, enjoying the time I was not sitting in a cramped corner of a lab. On one of these days, I was sitting on a bench enjoying the fresh air, and a male student walking by asked if he could sit next to me. I'm a pretty shy and awkward kind of person, So even though I really would have preferred sitting alone, I said sure. He initiated simple conversation, to which I obliged, but being careful not to be too forthcoming. He mentioned he had seen which departmental building I had came and went from, which slightly alarmed me, given I had never seen this person before in my life. But I pushed the thought from my mind. After all, the weather had been decent lately, and I had spent nearly all of my lunch hours for the past week outside. He asked if I was studying within the mentioned department, to which I told him that I was not a student, but I rather worked there. He told me that he was an engineering student, and then followed up, asking me out to coffee sometime. I apologized and told him that I had a boyfriend and would have to decline. We parted ways after that, and I assumed I probably wouldn't see him around again. About a week or two went by, and I was spending another lunch hour outside on campus, sitting on a different bench somewhere else. Seemingly out of nowhere, the same man from before asked if he could sit next to me again. Admittedly, I don't remember what he started talking to me about at first. My mind was reeling, and I was rather uncomfortable having to potentially turn this guy down a second time. Sure enough, he asked me again if we could go out for coffee sometime. I apologized and reminded him that I had a boyfriend and would not be meeting him for coffee. And again, he left after that. I was feeling rather anxious now, but it still hadn't reached a level where I felt that I had to be concerned. A few days later, I had finished work and was leaving the building to walk to where I had parked my car. The university charges a fortune for parking passes, even if you're employed by them. So I had always opted for free street parking about a 10-minute walk away from the campus. My walking route would take me down several quiet residential streets with minimal car traffic. Even pedestrian traffic was super sparse on the busiest of days. It wasn't until I was about halfway to my car, down one of these quiet back streets, that I noticed someone walking directly across the street from me, but keeping a few paces behind. I noticed him from my peripheral vision and didn't want to flat turn around to stare at him. It wasn't uncommon to see someone else by any means. I was just always trying to be aware of my surroundings when walking the streets alone. I had to make a few turns coming up anyways, and the chance that they would be going the same way as me was pretty slim. But he did. He made all the turns I did, still walking on the sidewalk across from me, a few steps behind. I still did not want to look at whoever this was. I didn't want him to know that I was aware of what I thought he was doing. I quickened my pace to a speedy walk. I was approaching the first of two busier streets before I would reach my car. His pace quickened to keep up with me. That was the moment I panicked. The moment I was sure that he was indeed following me. After that, I started a full-out jog to cross the first of the busier streets. He ran to keep up behind me, and was now on the same side of the street that I was. I was now nearly at my car. I had to cross the last busy street and get about 100 meters and I would be there. But it was crossing the street that worried me. I often had to stop and wait a good minute or so before it was clear enough to do so. If this were the case, he would catch up with me. But as if the stars aligned, as soon as I made it running to the busy street, I had a gap to cross. I booked it as fast as I could, finally turning around once I had made it, to look and yell at the man who had been pursuing me. It was him. I could have suspected, but now it was confirmed. It was the engineering student whom I had turned down for coffee. "Stop following me," I yelled at him from across the busy street. "Can I just talk to you?" he yelled back. I didn't even answer him. I mean, the answer should have been obvious from the start, and I was certainly never going to have my time to someone who had just followed and then chased me for about a kilometer. I kept moving quickly to my car, so determined to get the heck out of there that I didn't even care if he saw which car was mine. He had given up following me and never tried to cross the road too, to my relief. I got home and broke down. I mean, worse things had happened to other people, no doubt, and I was not harmed, fortunately. But I was shook. I had some anxieties walking to and from work after that. It wasn't long before a coworker and I would walk most of the distance back to our cars together after work. I even changed where I started parking for a time. A few weeks had passed since the incident, and I had not seen him around campus at all. I had started spending my lunches in the lab instead of outside, but occasionally I would go to the student center to buy lunch instead. This one particular day, the food court in the student center was packed, almost shoulder to shoulder. I was standing in line at a burger stall, and I heard a guy try and get someone's attention through the crowd. I look up and it's him again, waving to me and trying to make his way through the people. I panicked, and even though I'm terribly shy, I started a scene and yelled to him to leave me the heck alone. His face dropped instantly as people stared at us, and he slinked back into the sea of students. My heart was pounding, and I was shaking. I don't even remember if I ended up getting food after that. I went back to work, and from then on was even more focused on my surroundings than I ever was before. It's been 5 or 6 years since then now, and I still work at the university. I am so relieved to say that I never saw him again after the food court, and haven't had any other harrowing accounts on campus. I am still diligent about being aware of my surroundings, especially when I have to walk to and from campus alone. I never asked the guy his name, so I couldn't even report an incident to campus police or anything. All in all, I'm just glad that I never saw him again, and I can only hope that he never did this to any other girl before or after me. Meet Jane. I don't know much about Jane except that she's from a small town, and she moved here with her friends and boyfriend for university. When I first met Jane at the pub, I thought she hated my guts. She always gave me nasty looks, and when my friends tried to approach her friends, she'd be rude to me. Jane is pretty. Like, very, very pretty. Like, every guy in town has a thing for her. But Jane's boyfriend is insane to say the least. They're regulars at the pub, and I've seen them break up around 3 to 4 times. And the waiter working at the pub, a guy in my friend group, says he's noticed them break up a dozen more, but they always come back together. A couple of months back, I had just finished with the gym, and I had just showered when my mom called and asked about this pub and how's the food there. I told her the food's to die for, and she said that she and my stepdad were on their way there. I told them that I would meet them too because I was dying for some hot wings and a burger. We sat down, and me and my dad just start drinking beer after beer, and in no time I had downed around 5 half-liter pints of beer. I was getting a little bit tipsy, but I kept pushing through. My dear friend, let's call her Tina, called and asked if I was down for a drink. I told her to come to the pub as I was already there. She's gonna meet my folks, and they planned on leaving soon, so she and I could continue. That's how it happened. My parents left, and Tina and I continued drinking on our own. The pub was closing, so Tina decided to go to the bathroom, and I walked with her inside to see if I could get another pint. We stumble upon Jane. Jane starts talking to Tina, and they realize they know each other. We all sat down to comfort her as she was a crying mess. Her boyfriend and she were done for good, and she revealed that he used to really abuse her, mentally and physically. I felt bad for her, so when she rested on my shoulder, I just let her. The next night, I get a DM from her, and she's apologizing about the trauma dumping. I tell her it's no biggie as we all need to vent sometimes. Albeit, I do that to my therapist, not strangers, but whatever. The therapist is a stranger I pay, I guess. We continue chatting, and she constantly goes between I can't text you, and then texting me again. Don't text me, and text me first when I don't. Keep in mind, this is like 2 days since that interaction. One drunken night, she texted me to meet her. It was around 2 a.m., and I had my little cousin come over. That whole night we watched movies and had just fallen asleep, so I declined her offer. Also, I feel it a bit weird for me to hang out with her completely sober while she can barely see. I don't know, just weird to me. The next day she sobered up, and I agreed to meet her for a hangout. We hung out for a while and she was fun to hang out with. I did like her and worry about her and her ex. Soon enough, her leech of an ex left town, as he was never really interested in uni, just being close to her. On one of our dates, she revealed to me that she realized that she had feelings for me, and that's when she broke up with her ex, resulting in him physically attacking her. One day we had a date at her place, a little study date. After we finished studying, we relaxed on the couch and ended up making out. I went home and we continued talking about it, even exchanging photos, and then we hooked up. Now, I'm a person who likes alone time, so sometimes I just want to chill at my house and not really be with anyone, and she did not like this idea. She started spamming me with calls, saying how she could come over and we can chill. She'll be silent and I'd be alone. In my opinion, this kind of defeats the idea of being alone, as I'm not really alone in that situation. She threatened me that if I didn't pick up the phone that she would never talk to me again. This is where I snapped and told her that her lukewarm, at best manipulation tactics would not work on me and to not contact me again. She flipped out and came to my part of town, hanging out and waiting for me to come out. I told her, I begged her 1,000,000 times to not come to my house, but she simply said, "Nah, I'll pass," and came anyway. I literally felt so disrespected because all of a sudden I hold no value in life. When she texted me, "Come out, I'm here," I texted her, "Nah, I'll pass," and stayed home. Now she's following me everywhere I go. It's been months, and I'm dating the girl of my dreams, but that's not stopped her from being in my shadow. She learned my routine, when I go to the gym, when I'm at practice, etc., and she never fails to show up or drive past where I'm at. My stepbrother reviewed the security footage from our house, and we counted her car driving past my house at least 14 times in a day. I still get texts from her on the daily, even though she's blocked. She gets wasted and spams me with messages on WhatsApp, and then she deletes them. My girlfriend is absolutely livid with this chick and said that she would not leave me the heck alone. I don't fear for my life, but I have warned my friends that if I die, it would not be an accident or a self-unaliving. She's in my shadow. I constantly have to check my 6 to see if she's behind me. This next post is actually an update to our last post. So a lot of stuff happened 2 days ago, and I couldn't update right away as I really needed to shut off as I had a huge exam today. But now, I can finally let myself process it without it causing any distractions. We met again, at my house. 2 days ago, I went to the pub with my friend Stan. He's a new friend of mine as he's a close friend of one of my best friends. My neighbor best friend Jake was in Durban to visit an aunt. And me and Stan went to the pub as his friend and my other best friend Liam was having the closing shift at the pub. So we went and visited him and had a few drinks. She was there, and everyone was giving me these weird stares like I had murdered their whole family. Finally, the shift manager whom I'm close with came to me, and she laughingly told me that Jane got extremely drunk and talked about a man the whole night at the pub while sobbing. She then showed them a picture of me, and according to some other waiters, she was throwing an entire tantrum because she loved me, and she left her boyfriend because of me. Regardless, I brushed it off, and had to fight off the player accusation, because I'm not one. Anyway, Liam finished his shift. We got into my car and we drove to my house where my girlfriend had already arrived. My mom and her were in the kitchen making dinner, and my stepbrother, younger brother, and stepdad were in the living room just talking, so I joined them with my friends. At one point, I was in the kitchen with my mom, girlfriend, and stepbrother, and my mom asked who made the kitchen into a mess this morning, and my stepbrother said someone else, referring to me and my younger brother. We burst out laughing, so I didn't hear the doorbell. My stepdad did, and he went to open the door. Jane was at the door. She had let herself in, and she was standing in the living room yelling after me. We came out of the kitchen, and we were just staring at each other. She begged me to talk to her, and I had just stared at her and told her that we already covered everything, but she continued begging me. My girlfriend pulled me aside and told me to just talk with her. Maybe it'll give her closure and she'll finally leave me alone. I took her to my backyard. She started apologizing for hurting me. She said I'm sorry like 15 times. I told her that she has nothing to apologize for, and that I sadly cannot forgive manipulations that easy, and that she should give up. She started blaming the alcohol on it, and how she was drunk that night. And I told her that she's been drunk every day for 9 months now since she's arrived in this town, and she only knows me for 6 of those 9 months. She tells me how she used to drink herself crazy back then because of me too. Here's where I snapped, and I told her, I just caught her in another one of her lies, and she smirked, gave me this creepy look and said, I love lying to you. The look she gave me sent shivers down my spine. My yard was dark, and her eyes just seemed demonic for a moment. She was continually getting closer to me, and I froze. I couldn't step back. Not that she'd hurt me as if I'm 6'2" with 250 pounds, but a knife would do some damage. But Jane had another idea. She launched herself at me, locking her lips with mine. I pushed her off, yelling for her to stop, yelling no, no, no. I walked inside. I was mad. My girlfriend looked like she was about to beat her up. I looked at my stepdad and begged him to drive her home. They got her out of my house as she was kicking and screaming. But then she refused my stepdad's car ride and decided to walk. In the middle of the night, and whoever lives in South Africa knows how stupid that idea is. Anyway, she got home safe, as I woke up to texts from her on WhatsApp that she had deleted, from a phone number she had me blocked from. So I pray that she's actually done with me this time, because this is just too much to handle. I worked as a flight attendant for a few years when I decided to take an extended sabbatical from college. There were a handful of let's not meet situations that I encountered, but one in particular still makes my skin crawl more than any other. I was born and raised in Texas, but I had moved to New York when I was 21. So when I found out at the beginning of a week-long trip that I'd have a couple of overnights in Austin, I was super excited to go to my home state for a few days. My brother lived just north of the city, and we planned to hang out and go to dinner the night we arrived when he got off of work. And the following days, we were going to meet up with our dad who lived about an hour away. So I get to the hotel downtown. The crew and I check in, and then we each head off to our respective rooms. Short elevator ride and I get to mine, where not even 5 minutes later there's a loud hard knock on the door. It was only around 1 or 2 p.m., and I hadn't called either my dad or brother to let them know that I was in town yet, so they would not know what room. I assumed it was maybe one of my crewmates, so I headed to that door. Before even making it to the door, however, a loud male voice on the other side boomed. The front desk sent me about the bathroom problem you called in. Before trying to open the door, unlock the door and open up, miss. I need in now. I froze in my tracks. I hadn't even been in the bathroom yet, let alone called anything to the front desk. I'm a petite chick, and while I don't take anything from anyone despite my size, I still err on the side of caution. Slowly inching toward the door to look out the peephole, All I could tell was that the man on the other side was at least 6 foot tall and easily over double my weight. No way in heck was I going to unlock the door. I responded to the guy, telling him that he must have had the wrong room. He continued pounding on the door while constantly turning the handle, telling me no, he needed in and was getting in the room one way or another. I panicked, but thankfully had the sense to grab the phone and call the front desk. The concierge confirmed that they had neither sent anyone up to the room, nor had they received a call about the bathroom. The entire time, this guy was still determined to get into my room, pounding and yelling. Luckily for me, the front desk had dispatched security to my floor. When the security officers step off the elevator a few seconds later, I can hear them in the hall approach and ask the guy who he was, what he was doing, and telling him that he needed to leave the hotel. He immediately gets hostile and aggressive towards them, and the front desk clerk I'm still on the phone with tells me that police have been called and are on their way. In the meantime, I'm trapped in my room, scared to death. Long story short, the cops show up pretty quickly and manage to arrest the guy for trespassing and criminal menacing or something like that. I later found out that the guy was also wanted in connection to a string of break-ins and violent assaults in Austin. He had seen and stalked me from the minute that I entered the hotel lobby. Apparently, I was exactly his type of victim. Nothing else happened after that. But it still rattled the crap out of me for the rest of my stay in that hotel. Back in 2018, I was 17 around that time, living in foster care. The group home was situated on a busy street. Despite living in the city, we had a backyard, basketball court, picnic table, and at the very back some grass. The whole backyard was surrounded by 2-meter-tall chain-link fences. There were houses to the right and left of ours. At the very back of the yard, on the other side of the fence, there was a public walking and biking path that stretched at least a dozen kilometers. This path would take you through this huge park along the water, to the beach, etc. It's a very popular area for people to visit. I was a regular cannabis smoker, although I was always very well put together for a teenager. The group home workers agreed to turn a blind eye on me as long as I didn't make it obvious. So on weekend mornings, I'd go for a walk to the park behind the house. I'd roll up on a park bench and smoke. One day, everything changed. It was a weekend morning as usual at 7 a.m. I made my way to my favorite park bench. I'm sitting there with my joint in my hands. It was quite windy and it kept lighting out. Facing the water, about 100 meters of field between the waterfront and I notice a man stomping through the field heading straight for me. He hadn't seemed like he was on a leisurely walk at all. I remember thinking to myself, 1, why is he not using the paved path? 2, why does it seem like he's walking straight towards me? 3, what is he holding? And 4, is anybody else around? Panic ensued. He was holding something chunky in one of his hands. I looked around for someone, noticed an elderly woman walking from the direction of the group home. She was about 20 meters away from me. I sped walk towards the woman. By the time I got to her, the man had made it to the bench I was sitting on. The woman kept walking towards the bench, and I in the opposite direction. For a moment, I looked back to make sure the man wasn't following me, or worse. I see the man lay his brick down on a pile of rocks behind the bench. The woman stopped walking. I'm guessing she had processed something peculiar. Thankfully, the man kept moving straight towards the boulevard, and not to be seen in the park. The woman then turns around, and she looks at me with this shocked stare in her eyes. I remember feeling reassured. We both continued on with our days without saying a single word. That same day, at around 9 p.m., people aren't allowed to smoke within 10 meters of an entry to an establishment, and there was only one light in the backyard. It was above the entry to the establishment. So this girl in my group home goes out for a smoke in the backyard. No lights. Like 3 minutes later, she's banging on the door yelling. I let her in. She's freaking out. We're trying to get answers out of her. Then she explains that there was a man. He stood there on the path. She watched and stared, taking pulls of her cigarette. The man then starts walking towards her and starts climbing the fence. That's when I shared my story from that same morning. To be honest, I thought I was being paranoid at first. But when someone tried to hop the fence, I believe it was the same man. The workers on shift that night called the police, and the police started patrolling the path at night. The group home added some garden lights in the back, and I hope that this person never lays hands on anyone. So I have a good story about something that happened to my ex-partner and I back in 2014. So, my partner and I decided that she was going to go on birth control and made an appointment with the OBGYN at our university's student health services. I take her in. She goes to her appointment and I wait in the waiting room. She comes back out and I leave. While in there, I noticed the man at the front desk kept looking at me and darting away when I made eye contact. Fast forward to the next evening. My partner and I are having dinner at about 8 p.m. when her phone rings. She answers, and it's the guy from the front desk at the Student Health Services office. He introduces himself as such. He goes on to tell her that the STD test came back clean. They do this before you go on birth control, which is odd, because they usually put that info online in a secure portal. Then he starts asking about her sexual history and how many partners she's had. Although she was uncomfortable with answering this, she did, thinking that the front desk guy was asking for information from the doctor. Then he asks if the person she was with was her husband, and she said, "No, it's my boyfriend." Then he says something along the lines of, "Well, I think you're beautiful and clean, and I'll treat you better than him. I want you to come over to my apartment." Startled and confused, she said, "Wait, excuse me? That's inappropriate. Please let me talk to the doctor." He responded, "I'm not at the office. It's closed. I'm calling you from my cell phone." She asks, "Well, how did you get my number? I didn't give it to you." He said, "Oh, I know. It was in your file. I thought you were beautiful, so I added it to my phone after you had no STDs. I also saw your address was near mine, so I'd like to come over. Don't worry about your boyfriend. I can take care of him. I can come over now if you'd like." So she hung up the phone immediately and we called the police and filed a report. I spent the night looking at the front door with a baseball bat. The next day, we ended up starting a case with the school because it was Student Health Services. They tried apologizing at first and saying he was new, but we said, "Oh no, this is not ignorance." We called the dean of the health department and told them what happened and that we were going to file a lawsuit. Needless to say, he was immediately fired and expelled from the school. As he was an international student, he also had to leave the country. Because we didn't want to cost our school money, and they acted swiftly, we didn't pursue any further legal actions. But I still can't get over it sometimes. Update 1. A few of you are mentioning litigation. While I'm sure that we could have, it wasn't something that we were interested in. It's our alma mater, and that money would be coming out of resources, scholarships, and opportunities for other students. Once we went to someone, they not only believed us, but acted swiftly and decisively, and that's all we wanted. Update 2. He wasn't deported, but he was on a student visa and expelled, and the university made sure that he was on his way home very soon. Back in 2013, I was living with my ex at the time who lived near a nice country village. And as I was in between jobs at the time, I picked up a job at a local garden center. It was casual retail work, fairly decent pay, and easygoing enough that I could take coffee breaks frequently and wear basically whatever I liked as long as I wore my work polo shirt. It was walking distance from my ex's house, and full of people of all ages who were the most lovely people I ever met. Most of the regular customers who came to the garden center were usually sweet old people who would visit the cafe because we had free teas and discounted lunches for OAPs if they had a store card. So you often got to know all of them, and some of them we gave nicknames. Most of them sweet, like Pink Hair Lady, who wore a tasseled leather jacket and bright pink hair. Then there was Camper Van Couple, who used to drive a really cool camper van with bright orange flowers painted on it. You get the idea. With Creepy Artist Man, though, he gave most of the young girls weird vibes. He wore a straw hat, had round gold-rimmed glasses, and would wear strange graphic shirts with naked women on them. He always wore ripped jeans where his knees were always hanging out of them, which were always dirty with paint or mud or something. He had this weird half smile that would never leave his face, and a kind of leer that made people feel uncomfortable. He would take off his glasses and clean them constantly, which kind of made you feel like he was trying to get a better look at the girls who worked there, especially the younger ones, 16-plus school leavers usually. Anyway, it was a roasting hot summer's day, and I had gratefully accepted the job of watering the hanging baskets outside, where I could avoid the humid, sweaty heat of the greenhouses. I was wearing black shorts and my red polo, and my tool belt to prune and dead head plants as I went. With the hose in my hand and sunglasses on my face, I was busy but enjoying the solitary job at the quietest part of the garden center. Well, hello there. Out of practically nowhere, he slipped out behind some wooden trellises and looked me up and down, smiling with his weird, too small teeth. His eyes lingered on me for what felt like an uncomfortable few seconds, and I turned off my hose and asked him if he needed anything. He shook his head and kind of shrugged, still smirking at my legs. I'll call him Cag for ease. Me. Okay, sir, have a nice day. Let me know if you need anything. I turned to continue. Cag. I've never seen you here before, you're a new one. Me. Huh? Me? Well, I've been here for 8 months now. Cag. I must have missed the memo that a beauty like you started. You have a nice tan. You look young. Me. Thanks, I'm 23. Anyways, I have to get back to work. Cag. Nice to meet you. I suddenly remember my name badge and get slightly irritated that he now knew my full name. I make a beeline for the smoking area, where the tool shed was, with an excuse to grab some smaller gardening gloves, and by the time I returned to the floor, he had left. As the weeks went by, he would come into the store regularly, usually mid-afternoon, coincidentally, or so I thought, around the time I started my shift. Most of the time I was the only cashier, so I would have to serve him. He would buy the most smallest, pointless things, like floristry wire, or a tiny bag of birdseed. It seemed like he would purposely make a purchase with the intention of interacting with me. He would make comments about my appearance, statements mostly like, "You have your hair different today. Yesterday you had it down. You have new glasses," or "That's a different lip color to yesterday." He would always announce my name loudly and deliberately during every interaction. I felt uncomfortable, but I was 23 and just politely shrugged it off. Around Christmas time, I was decorating the artificial trees, and he cornered me in the forest of them at the back of the store. He jumped out from behind one and made me jump, to which I was kind of angry about him doing, because I dropped a glass ornament and it had smashed. He bent down also and tried to help, grabbing my wrist and telling me not to touch the glass. His grip was scarily tight and forceful, and his hands were clammy and gross. I slipped my hand out of his grip and asked if I could help him with anything. That's when it got weird. He pulled out a leaflet from his back pocket and told me he was an artist and had a Christmas art show happening in the local church hall, and he wanted me to go with him. He told me that he was a painter, and he thought I would like his work. I had never indicated I was interested in art, to him or anyone else for that matter, which is why I thought it was strange. I asked him if he wanted me to pin the leaflet to the local event board, and he reached out and touched my arm and said, "No, the invitation is specifically for you."
He pointed his finger and jabbed it into my breast and he said, "You." So I'm standing there in a dark corner obscured from view by artificial Christmas trees, just kind of cornered by this guy who was touching me. I cringed away and said, "I was busy with my boyfriend that day, sorry," and kind of scampered off. I remember feeling really strange after that. The fact he grabbed my wrist and jabbed his finger into my chest that way. I told a few of my colleagues about it, and they all told me they would warn me next time he was in the store, so I could maybe hang out at the storeroom until he was gone. Well, that memo must have missed a few of the temp Christmas staff, because one day I get told by one, "Your friend is asking for you at the tills." It wasn't unusual for my friends to stop by, as it was fairly popular for gifts, etc. So thinking it was maybe my ex's mom or something, I head to the till, and there he is. He's holding a piece of paper. I cringe, but he had seen me now, so I walk over and ask what he needed from me. He passed the paper over and asked me to open it. Folded up was a drawing of me, with exaggerated breasts and cartoon-like eyes watering the hanging baskets in a sexual kind of position. I kind of stood there and said thank you, but I couldn't keep it, as I thought it was inappropriate to take gifts from customers. I handed it back to him, and he kind of looked at me with this angry stare. He turned around and walked out without another word. By this point, I had had enough. I knocked on my manager's door and told him about the whole scenario that just happened, and all the previous interactions I had had with him over the past year. He watched the CCTV, and agreed that it was so strange the way he gave me this gross picture, and told me he would talk to him if he came back. He praised me for my reaction to his advances, and said I was doing the right thing, and he would try and see him off next time. The next day was a Sunday, and I was not due into work. My boss calls me and tells me he just received a call from HQ stating that an anonymous caller had called in to report a staff member inappropriately coming onto a customer. The staff member they had described and named was me. The caller had said that I had been inappropriate towards him at work, offered to have sex with him, had led him on and obviously promiscuous, and that I had been pursuing him for over a year. The jerk even described a fictitious relationship we had had and ranted loudly about how I had been cheating on my boyfriend before hanging up. HQ luckily didn't believe a word, as my manager had already mentioned the guy to one of the higher-ups, but they thought it was wise to let me know about this crazy guy and suggest I report it to the police. The next day, I did just that. The officer I spoke to said that he matched the description of a man, somebody who often harasses young girls in the local area. He was also known to stalk girls in his car and had attempted to abduct a young girl 4 years ago. The police officers assured me they would file the report and talk to him officially, and that he was not allowed in the garden center or anywhere near me again. And if he did, I was to call the police and he would be arrested. Unfortunately, though, it never stopped him sending a ranting letter to my workplace addressed to me saying he would kill himself if I didn't take him back and receive his gift he drew of me. Fortunately, the police saw this as unsolicited contact and he was thankfully arrested.
So, creepy artist guy, let's not meet again. This happened to me years ago, but still affects me to this day. I apologize for the length ahead in advance, but I feel like I have to tell the whole story. The summer after I graduated high school, I was still living at home. I was up late one night and was packing for a camping trip with my friends. It was unbelievably hot and had the window open as I sat and folded clothes. It was around 2 a.m, and the next thing I knew, there was a hand coming through the gap in the screen of my window. I screamed, and the hand flew back out. I was stunned, but there was a part of me that wondered if it was my younger brother pranking me. I got up and looked out the window, and just saw the figure of a man staring back at me. I ran into my brother's room, and he was there playing video games. We called the police, who came and searched the area. They found nothing, warned me and my parents to lock the windows and doors, and left. We were all still shaken up, and my mom had a feeling that he would come back. It turns out that my mother's intuition was right. She went outside and waited on our back porch. After 20 minutes or so, she saw a man dressed in black slink into our backyard along the tree line. There wasn't a fence on that side, unfortunately. He hid behind a tree for a few seconds, and then ran to another tree and hid there, slowly working his way towards my window. My mother yelled something to him and he took off running. The police came back out and again found no trace of him. I never opened that window again, not even the curtains. My parents installed some motion detecting lights, and that seemed to be the end of that. About 6 months later, my friend and I got an apartment downtown together. We were really excited as this was our first place on our own. The apartment wasn't exactly the best quality, but it was so fun to be living in the city. The downside was that it was street parking only. After a few weeks, my car was broken into. Nothing was taken, but a single rose sat on the passenger seat. It was creepy, but I vowed to be vigilant and safe. I always tried to park close to the entrance near the lights, but often it was difficult to get those spots, and I would often have to park further away on darker streets. Things quickly began escalating at this point. My car was broken into at least once a week. Most of the time, a flower was left, which I always threw on the ground. But once, a pair of man's underwear was left, and even more creepily, once a bag of Tootsie Rolls, as they were my favorite candy. This made me wonder if the person knew me personally, and I started to become suspicious of everyone. There was a laundry in the basement of the apartment, and one day I went down to get a load that finished drying. As I started to fold, I realized that all of my undergarments were gone. Another week, I had a male friend over from school, and his tires got slashed during the visit. By the time the first letter arrived, I had already started making plans to move elsewhere. The letter described a love for me that had been going on for years. He noted things that proved that he had been watching me closely. I was able to arrange for another friend to take over my lease, and I moved in with another friend on the other side of the city. It was a secured building and had an underground parking garage that was only accessible to tenants. I felt much more secure, and the extra money spent was well worth the peace of mind. Things were quiet for a few months, and then my roommate got a boyfriend. Most of us were wary of Ashley's new boyfriend from the beginning. For one, they met on MySpace after he reached out to her. Another reason was that new boyfriend, Matt, was extremely good looking. And while Ashley was a wonderful person, she wasn't the type that you would typically expect someone like him to date. Ashley was thrilled. She had never had a boyfriend and really felt like this was her Prince Charming. I thought that he was weird and creepy from the beginning. Matt was on the quiet side and always seemed to be sporting and uncomfortable. Leery smile. It was difficult to carry on any sort of conversation with him because he would always make it weird with some random facts that were completely unrelated to what we were talking about. I had deleted my MySpace when the initial stalking began, but I created a dummy account to learn more about Matt. It didn't look like he really knew any of his friends in real life. There were only pictures of himself, and the rest of the information was vague. My friends and I gently tried to discourage her from seeing Matt. He technically hadn't done anything wrong, but he was just so strange. She would immediately get defensive and would shut the conversation down. Matt started to spend more time at the apartment, and I found myself finding any excuse I could to avoid coming home. One day I came home from work and found Matt on my couch, alone drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work, and she told him that he could just hang out. I was furious because I didn't want to spend any time with him, so I grabbed a beer and a snack and headed off to my room and shut the door. About 30 minutes or so later, he knocked on my door and suggested that we watch some TV and to get to know each other better because we both loved Ashley. I didn't want to, but decided that maybe I needed to give it a try. He put on a movie, and I tried to just focus on the movie because I didn't want to talk. At one point, I glanced over to Matt, and he was staring at me with a smile on his face. I snapped a what at him, and he just continued smiling and said, "I just can't believe it." "Believe what?" I asked. He said nothing, and we went back to watching the movie. He was still smiling. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the interaction had every hair standing up on my body. I excused myself and locked the door to my room. Another month or so went on, and I had managed to avoid being home for much anything beyond sleep and showering. Matt practically lived there, and had even brought a bunch of his friends into Ashley's room. I really didn't want to move again, but I was beginning to look for other options. On their 6-month anniversary, I saw a huge bouquet of flowers on the table and an already open card propped up next to it. I rolled my eyes and was about to leave when I decided to see what the weirdo wrote to her. When I opened the card, my heart started beating through my chest. Without even reading the words he wrote, I was shaking. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one my stalker had sent. I had kept them as evidence and dug them out of my desk for comparison. The handwriting was unique and identical. Matt was the stalker. I called the police first. As they were on the way, I called Ashley and asked her to come over. She was at work, but said she would be there when she could. I was terrified to tell her because I knew that she would be shattered. The police took a statement from me and actually went to Ashley's work to get more information from her, and they ended up breaking the news. Apparently, Ashley called Matt and left a furious message, even though the cops told her not to say anything and he completely disappeared after that. There was no Matt or anyone matching his resemblance at the place that he said he worked. Ashley had never been to his apartment because he said that he had been staying with friends while trying to save money for a trip to Europe. His family lived out of state, and she had never had a friend of his because he said that they had been falling out because he was choosing to spend so much time with Ashley. It was all lies, and in the end, she was dating a stranger. We don't even know if Matt was his real name. The cherry on the top of this whole thing was that we went through Matt's things. He had left everything when he disappeared, and Ashley and I decided to go through everything. There was a duffel bag that was full of gym clothes, but in one of the compartments, there were about 10 pictures of me. All were taken from far away with the exception of one of me sleeping. The sheets were current, so I knew that it had to have been at the current apartment before I started locking my bedroom door. A few pictures dated back to before the incident at my parents' house, which made us think that that was him as well. 2 pairs of my missing underwear were there, and I shudder to think of what he did with the rest. A Starbucks lid with my red lipstick marks. A necklace I hadn't even noticed missing. A few other random sick souvenirs. The police never tracked him down. I decided to accept an opportunity overseas that I had been considering and got the heck out of there. Unfortunately, Ashley and I quickly drifted apart. She had a really hard time accepting that her first love was a complete psycho. I think I had some underlying anger, maybe misplaced, for believing all of his lies and letting him into our lives. I don't know what his endgame was. Would he have tried to hurt me? Or was he simply content with being in my world? I'll never know. Being stalked changes you. Even when I lived across the world, I looked over my shoulder everywhere I went. I still have no social media accounts attached to my real name. I am married with children and know that he moved on to torment some other poor woman. But every time I visit my hometown, I am tense and keep a low profile. Part of me will always worry that Matt will resurface again. I live in a small, sleepy town, mostly populated by elderly people or people looking to raise their kids in a quiet, tight-knit area. The highest form of crime that goes on here is domestic abuse or someone trying to rob the gas stations, which usually fails since the only gas stations in town are neighboring the police department. I've always been a paranoid kid, my mother having taught me to be afraid of the world. Now I have schizoaffective disorder. I hallucinate often, and sometimes it's hard to tell real people from hallucinations. Tonight was a night where I was 100% sure that this man was real. The night began with me and my buddy deciding to hang out around late 8 p.m. We were planning on going to the local grocery store with a combined $25 to get snacks. But by the time we got in the general vicinity, we realized the store had closed 10 minutes ago at 9. So we decided to go to the gas station instead. Second best option, right? We turned, and I noticed a man who seemed to be in his 20s sitting near the courthouse, with his phone and body facing towards us. Please note that me and my buddy are both unconventional looking. My buddy wearing punkish clothing, while I was wearing green harem pants and a button-up. Fashion stars, I know. We both laughed it off and assumed it was just a guy about to post us onto Snapchat about how ridiculous we looked. A common trend among younger people here. So we brushed it off. We walked around the courthouse to avoid the guy in case he was going to try to confront us, and went on our way to the gas station. We ended up walking by the same side of the courtyard that he was on, and I checked to make sure that he was still there. He indeed was. I made a note of it and we went into the gas station. We both have had pictures taken of us before and people laughing at us, so we just assumed it was another case of this. The more I thought about it though, the more unsettled I felt. Alarm bells kept going off in my head, telling me that something about this situation was not safe. We bought snacks and left, walking by the laundromat back in the direction of the courthouse, as we both lived in that direction. I saw a guy in the laundromat that looked eerily similar to one from just 10 minutes before, but I didn't say anything. We kept walking, and right before we walked in front of the large window of the laundromat, I noticed the guy was holding his phone against the glass, right where we were about to walk in front of it. I panicked, grabbed my buddy's arm, and darted off in the opposite direction. I'm not sure what this guy's infatuation was with recording us, but I was done. I speed walked back to the gas station. Meanwhile, my buddy was telling me that it wasn't a big deal and that it was fine. I told the manager of the station, and he recommended we go to the police. I'm not a fan of the police, and my buddy has a fear of them. But we had no weapons, no way of defending ourselves other than our hands. And who knows what this guy had on him. I walked to the police station next door, despite my friend protesting, and convinced him to come with me, because I didn't trust him outside on his own. Besides, the guy was now sitting outside the laundromat for some reason. After a small wait, we got our names taken, birthdays, and 2 officers came and spoke with us. We described the guy, and they mentioned that they had already gotten a call involving the laundromat and were on their way over there anyways. I described the situation and how he had his phone literally against the glass on the window, right as we were walking past it. And they both agreed that it was creepy, and they were glad that we came instead of going home. We sat outside the station to wait so that we could get fresh air. Eventually, they went to check it out, and were given the okay to go home. We went a very out-of-the-way direction, though, just to be safe. I work at a grocery store here in town, and I hope that I never see this guy again. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.